Hi students, welcome to lesson number 23, focus group study, meaning, characteristic, advantages and disadvantages. Introduction. The focus group technique has been recently rediscovered by social scientists. It has become the subject of important methodological discussions and it is now considered a very innovative research method. However, such a widespread use of focus group seems to have become a fashionable research technique. The impression is that focus group is often adopted without any prior consideration of whether it really is the most suitable research technique or achieving the cognitive goals of the research. At the same time, it seems that the focus groups often adopted only because it is considered an easy to organize and inexpensive technique. Let us look into the objectives. 1. To study the meaning of focus groups, to examine the characteristics of focus group, to know the advantages and disadvantages of focus group in research. Focus group interviews as a technique of collecting data in qualitative studies has gained popularity in the past few decades. While definitions of focus groups have slight differences, two aspects or words characterized most of them, namely the group and interaction. Focus groups resemble qualitative interviews in that a researcher may prepare a guide in advance and interact with participants by asking those questions. However, anyone who has conducted both one-on-one interview and focus group knows that each is unique. In an interview, usually one member, the research participant, is most active while the researcher, plays the role of listener, the conversation guider and question asker. Focus groups, on the other hand, are planned discussions designed to elicit group interaction and obtain perceptions on a defined area of interest in a permissive, non-threatening environment. In this case, the researcher may play a less active role than in one-on-one interview. The researcher's aim is to get participants talking to each other and to observe interactions among participants. Let us study the characteristics of focus group. The two main characteristics that differentiate the focus group from other techniques of information gathering in social research are: firstly, in focus groups, the informative source is a group. Secondly, the heuristic value of this technique lies in the kind of interaction that emerges during the debate. Several researchers have indicated these two aspects. 3. Focus group discussion is a standard methodological technique used in many disciplines as a means of gathering in-depth qualitative data. 4. In focus groups discussions, researchers bring participants together and encourage group interaction to obtain unique perceptions on a defined area of interest. Focus groups are therefore a valuable tool for enabling a group perspective to be formed and debated in a way that generates data that are different. 5. Focus group discussions have also proved popular because they help give a voice to marginalized, serving as a tool to empower participants, not least by providing a forum in which all participants are treated equally. They also have the practical advantage of enabling information to be collected from a number of participants in a short period. Stage 2 followed the scoping interviews and consisted of community focus groups. Focus groups were adopted as a method because of their usefulness in eliciting collective community understandings and values, while allowing for contestation to be identified and negotiated. Now, let us look into what comprises a focus group. In some ways, focus groups require more planning than other qualitative methods of data collection, such as one-on-one interviews in which a researcher may be better able to dialogue. Researchers must take care to form focus groups with members who will want to interact with one another and to control the timing of the event so that participants are not asked nor expected to stay for a longer time than they have agreed to participate. The researcher should also be prepared to inform focus group participants of their responsibility to maintain the confidentiality of what is said in the group. While the researcher can and should encourage all focus group members to maintain confidentiality, they should also clarify to participants that the unique nature of the group setting prevents them from being able to promise that confidentiality will be maintained by other participants. Once focus group members leave the research setting, researchers cannot control what they say to other people. The group size should be determined in part by the topic of the interview, how much you think that participants will have to say without much prompting. If you think participants will feel passionately about the topic and will have much to say, I think a group of 3 to 5 makes sense. Any group larger than that can become easily unmanageable, especially when discussing heated topics. Some researchers say that a group of about 6 to 10 participants is the ideal size for focus group research. Others recommend that groups should include 3 to 12 participants. The size of the focus group is ultimately the decision of the researcher. When forming groups and deciding how large or small to make them, consider what you know about the topic and participants' potential feelings or interest and passions regarding the topic. Also, consider the researcher's comfort level and experience in conducting focus groups. These factors will help to decide which size is right in a particular case. Counterintuitive, but it is often better to form focus groups consisting of participants who do not know one another than to create groups consisting of friends, relatives or acquaintances. The reason for this is that group members who know each other may share some taken information for granted, knowledge or assumptions. In research, it is precisely the knowledge taken for granted that is often of interest. Thus, the focus group researcher should avoid setting up interactions where participants may be discouraged to question or raise issues that they take for granted. However, groups should not be so heterogeneous that participants will be unlikely to feel comfortable talking with one another. Focus group researchers must carefully consider the composition of the groups they put together. In this text on conducting focus groups, Morgan suggests that homogeneity in background and not homogeneity in attitudes should be the goal, since participants must feel comfortable speaking up, but must also have enough differences to facilitate a productive discussion. Whatever composition a researcher designs for these focus groups, it is important to keep in mind that focus group dynamics are shaped by multiple social contexts. The participants' silences as well as their speech may be shaped by gender, race, class, sexuality, age or other background characteristics or social dynamics, all of which might be suppressed or exacerbated depending on the composition of the group. Hollander suggests that researchers must pay careful attention to group composition, must be attentive to group dynamics during the focus group discussions, and should use multiple methods of data collection in order to untangle participants, responses and their relationship to the social context of the focus group. The role of the researcher or the moderator. In addition to the importance of the group composition, focus groups also require skillful moderation. A moderator is the researcher tasked with facilitating the conversation in the focus groups. The participants may ask each other follow-up questions, agree or disagree with one another, display body language that tells us something about their feelings, about the conversation, or even come up with questions not previously conceived of by the researcher. It is just these sorts of interactions and displays that are of interest to the researcher. A researcher conducting focus groups collects data on more than people's direct responses to their questions, as in interviews. The moderator's job is not to ask questions to each person individually, but to stimulate conversation between participants. It is important to set ground rules for focus groups at the outset of the discussion. Remind participants you have invited them to participate because you want to hear from all of them. Therefore, the group should aim to let just one person to speak at a time and avoid letting just a couple of participants dominate the conversation. One way to do this is to begin the discussion by asking participants to briefly introduce themselves or to provide a brief response to an opening question. This will help set the tone of having all group members participate. Also, ask participants to avoid having side conversations, thoughts or reactions to what is said in the group are important and should be shared with everyone. As the focus group gets rolling, the moderator will play a less active role as participants talk to one another. There may be times when the conversation stagnates or when, as moderator, wish to guide the conversation in another direction. In these instances, it is important to demonstrate that researchers have been paying attention to what participants have said. Being prepared to interject statements or questions such as, "I would really like to hear more about what Sunil and Joe think, about what Dominic and Jay have been saying, or several of you have mentioned X. What do others think about this?" will be important for keeping the conversation going. It can also help redirect the conversation, shift the focus to participants who have been less active in the group, and serve as a cue to those who may be dominating the conversation that it is time to allow others to speak. The researchers may choose to use multiple moderators to make managing these various tasks easier. Moderators are often too busy working with participants to take diligent notes during a focus group. Researchers may recruit a note taker who can record participants' responses. In essence, the note taker creates the first draft of interpretation for the data in the study. They note themes in responses, non-verbal cues, and other information to be included later in the analysis. The focus groups are analyzed in a similar way as interviews. However, the interactive dimension between participants adds another element to the analytical process. Researchers must attend to group dynamics of each focus group as verbal and non-verbal expressions. The tactical use of humor, interruptions in interaction, and disagreement between the participants and all data that vital to include in analysis. Note takers record these elements in field notes, which allow moderators to focus on the conversation. Now, let us examine the advantages of focus groups. 1. Focus groups share many of the strengths and weaknesses of one-on-one qualitative interviews. Both methods can yield very detailed, in-depth information, are excellent for studying social processes, and provide researchers with an opportunity not only to hear but what participants say, but also to observe what they do in terms of their body language. 2. Focus groups offer the added benefit of giving researchers a chance to collect data on human interaction by observing how group participants respond and react to one another. 3. Like one-on-one qualitative interviews, focus groups can also be quite expensive and time consuming. However, there may be some time savings with focus groups, as it takes fewer groups events than one-on-one interviews to gather data from the same number of people. 4. Another potential drawback of focus groups, which is not concerned for one-on-one interviews, is that one or two participants might dominate the group and silence the other participants. The careful planning and skillful moderation on the part of the researcher or crucial for avoiding or at least dealing with such possibilities. 5. In the social sciences, focus groups allow interviewers to study people in a more natural conversational pattern than typically occurs in one-to-one interview. In combination with participant observation, focus groups can be used for learning about group attitudes and patterns of interaction. 6. An advantage of focus group is their fairly low cost compared to surveys because focus groups allow a researcher to obtain results relatively quickly and increase the sample size by including several people at once. Another advantage is that a focus group can allow participants to learn from one another as they exchange views and to understand research as an enriching experience. 7. Focus group research can be used purely as a qualitative method or in combination with quantitative methods. Qualitative data collected in focus groups can help researchers decide what kinds of items to include in surveys. The moderator can inquire into and examine unforeseen issues that arise in the context of discussion. The format has a kind of face validity and is naturalistic in that the discussion can include storytelling, joking, disagreements and boasting. 8. Running focus group is straightforward and relatively inexpensive. Focus groups ordinarily consume less time than structured interviews, thus increasing sample sizes, lessening resource investment and providing fast results. 9. Focus groups tend to be more efficient when the data being gathered are related to researchers' interest. They are helpful and important for needs, assessments and project evaluations. 10. A focus group discussions can create synergy that can provide information that can't be gained in other ways. Vocabulary can be observed. New insightful perspectives and opinions are obtained. Sensitive topics can be discussed. Leading to personal disclosures, non-verbal behaviors play a role in the moderator's decision making and research results, increasing the chances of obtaining rich, in-depth information. Previously neglected or unnoticed phenomena can be brought to the researcher's attention. Disadvantages. 1. The focus group method provides little experimental control. Data are collected are usually difficult to analyze. The discussion must be audio or videotaped. Field notes have to be recorded and comments must be transcribed verbally and increasing the risk of error. The method requires careful training the trained interviewers. Group may vary considerably and investigators may have difficulty assembling the appropriate group. 2. There is also the potential for discussion facilitators to ask leading questions that produce biased results. The ability of the leader to facilitate the discussion may be critical as the group largely relies on the assisted discussion in order to produce results. Thus, there is the need for skilled group leaders. There is a risk that a leader could dominate the discussion. Results obtained may be biased when one or two participants dominate the discussion. 3. The representativeness of the sample is likely to be concerned. Generalizing knowledge learned about the sample may not generalize to population because participants are self-selected. The moderator may influence the group interactions, thus distorting results or findings. The participants' involvement in and contribution to the discussion plays a major role. Problems may arise if topics are controversial in nature, leading to disagreements and arguments. Dealing with sensitive topics is a challenge. A contrived or artificial environment may influence the interactions and thus bias responses. Ethical issues may arise regarding the confidentiality. The psychometric validity may be low. 4. A fundamental difficulty with focus group is issue of observer dependency. The results obtained are influenced by the researcher or his or her reading of the group's discussions. thus raising questions of the validity of the research. Focus groups are one-shot case studies, especially if they are measuring a property disposition relationship within the social sciences. Unless they are repeated, focus groups can create severe issues of external validity, especially the reactive effects of the testing arrangement. The other common and related criticism involves groupthink and the social desirability bias. 5. Another problem is with the setting of the focus group. If a focus group is held in a laboratory setting with a moderator who is a professor and the recording instrument is obtrusive, the participants may either hold back on their responses and or try to answer the moderator's questions with answers the participants feel that the moderator wants to hear. Another problem with the focus group setting is the lack of anonymity. With multiple participants, confidentiality cannot be assured. In terms of focus group composition, homogeneity of background among participants is recommended, while diverse attitudes within the group are ideal. The goal of a focus group is to encourage participants to talk with one another and engage in a conversation moderated by the researcher. Like one-on-one qualitative interviews, focus groups can yield very detailed information, are excellent for studying social processes and provide researchers with an opportunity to observe participants' body language. They also allow researchers to observe social interaction. Focus groups can be expensive and time consuming as one-on-one interviews. There is also the possibility that few participants will dominate the conversation and silence others in the groups. The general guidelines on how to conduct focus group discussions. When conducting a focus group discussion where the topic being discussed is of sensitive nature, it is recommended that the participants be of the same sex, age, range and socio-economic background. It is also desirable that the participants do not know each other prior to the discussion. The informed consent must be granted before beginning the discussion. In addition, before the discussion is to begin, potential group members should be briefed about the topic of discussion and informed about their rights, including the confidentiality. Example, that their identities will not be revealed in any report or publication. The important considerations are the homogeneity of the group members, settings and the nature of open-ended questions, which are hoped to encourage the members to talk more freely. The discussion must be held in a relaxed setting with the entire session recorded either audio or visual. There should also be a note taker who writes down all important aspects of the discussion, but who is not part of the discussion. This note taker must have in-depth knowledge about the topic at hand, should be trained in observing verbal and non-verbal feedback, for example, noting facial expression, and whose duty is to translate the notes taken during session into data for analysis. Areas of interest to be discussed during the session need to be specified by the moderators and organizers prior to the session. The moderator makes sure that all these areas are covered during the discussion. He or she introduces new topics, directs the conversation and encourages participation while trying to minimize bias. The moderator should create an environment that encourages members to share their views while keeping track of the discussion and preventing it from drifting from the topic at hand. Because the participants often do not know each other, the moderator must ensure that everyone feels comfortable and there is good rapport. The purpose and the format of the discussion should be made clear at the beginning of the session. All participants should be encouraged to participate, share their views and be told that divergent views are welcome. Formal explanation of the procedure should be given to the participants. Expectation setting is an essential component in this step. Expectations can include being involved in the discussion, arguing about certain topics and collective problem solving, introducing the members to one another and having a warm up can help prepare the participants for the discussion. The moderator must establish common ground for the participants in order to facilitate community feeling. The actual discussion takes place following discussion stimuli, which may be in the form of provocative thesis, a short film, lecture on a text, or unfolding of a concrete problem for which a solution needs to be found. The questions should be open-ended. However, they should be smooth transition from one question to the next. The session should ideally start with introductory questions to address the general topic, helping the participants to understand the broader context. The general questions should be followed by questions designed to elicit the specific information sought. The focus group should end the efforts to summarize the opinions of the participants. Group discussions can produce data and insights that would be less accessible without the interaction found in a group setting. The idea is that listening to one individual's description of his or her experiences stimulates ideas and memories of experiences in fellow participants. This process is also known as the group effect. Group members engage in a kind of chaining or cascading effect, talk links to or tumbles out of the topics and expressions preceding it. The group members discover a common language to describe similar experiences. This enables the capture of a form of native language or vernacular speech to understand the situation. Focus groups also provide an opportunity for disclosure among similar others in a setting where participants are validated. For example, in the context of workplace bullying, targeted employees often find themselves in situations where they experience a lack of voice and feelings of isolation. Use of focus groups to study workplace bullying therefore serves as both an efficacious and ethical venue for collecting such data. The interactive discussion based context of focus groups can illustrate how meanings are produced intersubjectively. The meaning production is naturally a socially shared process, making focus groups a useful method for researching the attitudes, experiences and understandings of individuals and groups. Let's sum up. The focus groups resemble qualitative interviews in that a researcher may prepare a guide in advance and interact with participants by asking those questions. In an interview, usually one member, the research participant, is most active while the other, the researcher, plays the role of listener, conversation guider and question asker. Focus groups, on the other hand, are planned discussions designed to elicit group interaction and obtain perceptions on a defined area of interest in a permissive, non-threatening environment. In focus group discussions, researchers bring participants together and encourage group interaction to obtain unique perceptions on a defined area of interest. Focus groups are therefore a valuable tool for enabling a group perspective to be formed and debated in a way that generates data that are different. Thank you.